We'll now start our spartanHelmet project. In this one, we will cover everything you need to know in order to get started with making a helmet. We're going to be going through all the skills you really need. This includes setting up image planes, which we'll do in this video. We're going to be blocking out a rough model, setting everything together in terms of modeling, making it a proper subdivision surface model, which you could use for any kind of VFX production. Then we're going to be looking into sculpting up the model a little bit just to add some breakup to it. After that, we are looking at doing the groom with XGen. Then we'll set up the shaders using some pretty interesting techniques, which gives you really good and procedural results. Next up, we are setting up the final lighting and then doing final render tweaks as well, just to make sure everything is there. So in this video, we are just starting off. We will set up the actual image planes, and in the next video, we will start the modeling. The first thing we want to make sure is that our scene is set to centimeters. If we go to Window, Settings and Preferences, and now under Settings, it's a little convoluted, but you'll get the hang of it. Here you can see the actual working units is set to centimeters. This is important because this makes it a bit easier to work in scale. What I mean is, if we now create a cube, this is now 1 centimeter big. You can see that because this is set to centimeter, which means that 1 unit is now 1 centimeter. If we change this to meters, now you can see that 1 unit is 1 meter. If we make another cube, you can see that this is now 1 meter. So the scale or the working units determines heavily the actual scale of the objects. This is not just arbitrary display units. It actually matters in terms of the scale of our models. So set it's back to centimeters. And the reason is because this model is going to be not terribly big. If we were to build a plane, we'd probably set this to meters. But since this model is fairly small, it fits on a human head, centimeters is better. There are a few reasons why we want to work in scale. The first one is that it's consistent. It means that if you were to work in real world scale, you can use this across your projects. Let's say this model is in the height is going to be around 34 centimeters, which means we know it's going to fit on a human head. If you were to make this 34 millimeters, it cannot fit on a human head. Or if it's 34 kilometers or 34 meters, it's not going to work. Which means that if you want to reuse assets from one project to another, or you're working in a collaborative setting, it's going to be incredibly hard to actually do so. The second one is that it works better when it comes to the general physicality of the Maya scene. Maya is very scale-based when it comes to a bunch of different things like the shaders. If you have subsurface scattering and you're not working in scale, everything is going to be all over the place. You don't have any consistent values, and it's just incredibly hard to do. If you're working in scale, you can use generic settings for all sorts of different things, and it's a lot easier to set it up. For our specific project, it doesn't matter a whole lot because we're just working internally, but I just wanted to have a quick discussion regarding that. It is important to set up the scale before we do anything else. Then we're going to be setting the project. We go to File, Project, and Set Project. I already have a location ready for it, so I've made a new folder. I'm just going to paste that in, and then we're going to set the project. And we're going to create a default workspace. Then we'll go to File, Project window, and now we're going to hit Accept. And now you can see that we just got all these nice folders. Then we're going to be saving our scene because we need to just get into the habit of saving right away. So if hit Control S, now it's going to go right into the correct folder under Scenes. And then we'll name this spartanHelmet imagePlanes 01. If we go to the outliner, now you can see we have the front and the side view. We have conveniently made image planes for you, which will fit right into these views. So if we go to the side view, spacebar, Maya, and the right view, it's not called the side view, but this is the one. Now if we select the camera, just click in the view or in the camera here, or we can select the actual side view. Hit Control A to go into the attribute editor, and then we scroll down to environment. You can also see this in the image plane chapter as well. So hit Create, and now under image name, this is where we will input our actual file. There are images now under the materials directory, which you can find in your downloads. You can also place these under your source images, like you see here, where they would go. That's really up to you. Like we talked about in a relative versus absolute path, it's probably better to put them on actually under this directory, because then we'll use a relative path, but it doesn't matter a whole lot. In my case, since I'm not going to be moving the project. So let's copy the file directory, paste it up here, and then we're just going to set this to be the side view. Then we're going to be doing this the same for the front view. Hit Maya, spacebar, Maya, front view, and then we're going to do the same thing here. Select the camera. Under environment, image plane, we're now going to set an actual image under image name. Then we set this to front view. And now what we can do, we can go to panels, layouts, and the layout I prefer to use is I prefer to have 2 panels side by side, which means I get this layout. This means that now this can be an orthographic view and this can be a perspective view. I prefer to only have one orthographic view at any one time, because then I have a lot more real estate to work with. So if we go into this view and we hit spacebar, Maya, and perspective, I want to turn this into a perspective view. So we now have these two, and these are perfectly in scale. Keep in mind that I have aligned these first in Photoshop. If you don't do that and you make sure they're not actually aligned, you're going to be in for a hard time. The reason is that they're not going to be fitting each other. They're going to be a little bit too big, and you're never going to be able to match these up. I've also made them pink. First off, it's nice flip normals branding, but second off, it's a lot easier to actually see them. If we were to have them to be perfectly gray, it would be a lot harder to actually see them in the viewport. And then we will go and select this one and move it back. Select the side one and move it back. This is just so we have a good workspace for it. I also prefer to work where they're both actually resting on the ground. Now you can see it's intersecting ground like this. I prefer that it's actually resting more on the ground. So it's almost on the ground and a little bit up, just so it's floating just a tiny bit. Then we will name them. We will call this image plane side. And we can just double click it to go into renaming. Image plane front. Then we will select both of them and group them. We do this with Control G. This is so it's easy to organize the scene later on. And we call this image planes underscore group. Then we will put them both on a layer. If we hit Control A, we can toggle between the attribute editor and the channel box and layer editor. On the bottom, we have the layers. If we click the icon to the right, now we can assign them both to a layer, which means we can toggle the visibility on and off. And more importantly for us, we can set this to be referenced, which means that we can't select them anymore. If you want to, of course, be able to select them, you can, of course, just disable that. And maybe want to just move them a little bit further out. Then we can turn to reference again, and we can double click the layer name, and then we can set this to be image planes. And I try to always give them a suffix like this. It doesn't really matter what it is. It just has to be a unique name, because otherwise it might conflict with something else we have. Then the last thing we have to do is we have to scale them up. Now, these are not in scale at all, so it's really important that we do that. We can do this in a few different ways, but the easiest one is if we go to Create, Measure Tools, Distance Tool. Distance Tool allows us to actually measure distances. So if you click once, and then you click twice while holding down the Shift key, it's now going to create a distance tool, and it's going to be right above it. And now you can see we have a number. This number measures the distance between these two locators. You can see there's a locator here and there's a locator here. And this means that we can now very easily get an accurate distance between these two. So we can select this locator, the top one, and we can move this up. You can see that we have the translate Y value, and this is the same as this. Well, it would be if this was set to 0. So let's just set this to 0, just so we make sure it's actually in 0. And now you can see that these two numbers are going to be exactly the same, just more decimals. Now we can move this up, or we can just set this value manually ourselves. So we know that this is going to be 34 centimeters, so we can just type 34, and now you can see that this pops up like so. The way I got the scale is that I was Googling the scale of real world Greek or Spartan helmets, and they're actually selling them. So I've actually found one online and just found the dimensions of it for shipping and stuff like that. So that's a pretty interesting way of doing it. Then we can take the image group and we can just scale it up. If we go to the front view now, we can now just try to scale her up so that these two would align. And we just want to make sure that this point is at, or this point here is at this point. So just scale it up a little bit more. It's a little bit hard to see, so let's disable the grid. We can do that by clicking the grid icon or go to show and grid. And we're just going to scale it up. Now you can see I'm not actually clicking on the manipulator, because what I'm doing, I'm just using the middle mouse button. I'm using actually a tablet now, just make it a little bit less clicky. But now we can just use the middle mouse button to scale it up. And right now, since we put the image planes down in the center, it scales from this point. And this is because we made a group, and the group's pivot would always be in the exact origin of the scene. So now we have pretty good scale. Really important to establish this beforehand. And I'm just gonna make sure that this is right in the center. Just move it a little bit like so. We are gonna be modeling this with symmetry, but we might as well just do everything in our power just to put it right in the center. Cool. So now we have our image planes in scale. We can delete the distance locators. We can just simply hit delete. We can disable the grid in the front view. I don't really need that. And now we are ready to model. Make sure to save your scene, and then we'll start modeling this in the next chapter.